Now we saying, yeah, though. Pull up stunt. Yeah, though. Yeah, though. Ice game flood. Yeah, though. Yeah, though. Every day I'm hustling. You know what it is, baby?
Y'all are now tuned into Talkin' Sports with Chris Mesa.
Hey y'all, this is Talkin' Sports with Chris Mesa, and we're back for episode 5. Thank you to those that have been watching this whole past month. I appreciate everybody that's come back and checking out the podcast. I really hope y'all are enjoying it. And to the new ones that are watching for the first time this week, thank you. Thank you for stopping by. I hope you enjoy it. And I've got a lot of good information for you, okay? So let's do a quick recap, okay? We've been doing this for a month now. So let's talk about what we've talked about from the beginning of the podcast till now. So what we've really done is we've really taken a deep dive into the NFL offseason. And what we've done is we've talked about each division is how this is broken up. And we've talked about the AFC West, we've talked about the AFC North, and we've talked about the free agency moves that they have made. We've talked about the NFL draft picks that they made. And then what we've done is we've talked about my early predictions for those divisions. So we covered a bunch of good information. So if you didn't get to catch those episodes, be sure to go back because it's worthy information. I think you'll enjoy it. If your teams are in those divisions, go back and listen because I've got my predictions there. I talk about the moves y'all have made, and it's some good content, okay? So now it's time to move on. We're going to move on to the NFC West this week. That's what we're going to be talking about, and we're going to cover it all this episode. We're going to talk about the offseason moves each team has made in the NFC West, and then we're going to talk about the NFL draft picks that they made, and I'm going to make my way too early predictions on the NFC West. So that's not all that I have for y'all today. We're going to run through it. We're going to give you good information, but I'm going to run through it, okay, pretty quickly, so be sure you're listening, okay? The next thing I'm going to cover after the NFC West is we're going to talk about the NBA playoffs. I'm going to give you an update on that. Man, things are really heating up in the NBA right now. Things are really fun. If you get a chance to watch the games tomorrow, be sure to watch them. There's some elimination games potentially happening, okay? You got some people fighting it out right now, and so it's good stuff. If you get a chance to watch tomorrow, it'll definitely entertain you, okay? So be sure not to miss that if you get a chance. And then to wrap this show up, I'm going to talk about a couple of notes that I have in college football recruiting. A couple of big things are taking place right now, and I'm going to give you those updates that I have. So let's get to it. Let's dive into this episode. First things first, let's talk about this NFC West and what's going on, all right? First team up, who else could it be? Of course, it's your Super Bowl champs, the Los Angeles Rams. So let's start this off. We're going to talk about a couple of additions that they've made to the team. They made offensive tackle. They picked up Joseph Noteboom. They picked up center Brian Allen. So it looks like they're trying to improve the offensive line. Here's a key pickup. They picked up wide receiver Allen Robinson. Allen had a down year last year with the Chicago Bears. But you got to keep in mind that Justin Fields was trying to find himself. Andy Dalton, he's a solid backup. But those are the two quarterbacks that Allen Robinson had, and it wasn't too solid, you know. So in 2019, Allen Robinson had 1,147 yards receiving. And in 2020, he had 1,250 yards receiving. A lot of the struggle from this past year was due to QB struggles, as I just mentioned in Chicago, as Justin Fields adapts to the NFL, and Andy Dalton, again, as I said, he's a solid backup, but that's about it, okay? Them two combined for 3,385 yards passing. Since we're talking about the Los Angeles Rams, let's put that into perspective, okay? Matthew Stafford alone threw for 4,886 yards just last year by himself. So that puts into perspective what happened there in Chicago, okay? So with Allen Robinson coming in, another target, another good target for Matt Stafford, good pickup for the Los Angeles Rams. And then last but certainly not least, definitely one of the big highlights for the Los Angeles Rams this year, they picked up linebacker Bobby Wagner from the Seattle Seahawks, 8-time Pro Bowler in his career so far, because the dude is playing lights out football still. Last season, Bobby Wagner had a ridiculous 170 tackles for the Seattle Seahawks. It's amazing. It's amazing, and what a pickup for the Los Angeles Rams, okay? But just because they had an awesome pickup, did they have a big loss too? Yeah, let's get into it, okay? So let's talk about who the Los Angeles Rams lost this offseason. Boom. Right off the bat, we're going to talk about outside linebacker or edge rusher Von Miller. The Los Angeles Rams lost Von Miller, 8-time Pro Bowler, who had 50 tackles and 9.5 sacks last season for them. They lost him to the Buffalo Bills, who is an AFC contender. This is a huge loss for the Rams. Huge. He's a leader on the field. Von Miller is an incredible athlete and player there at the edge position. There's no question about it when he's out there. If that edge is in good shape, he takes care of it, right? Okay, so that's a big loss for the Los Angeles Rams. Let's cover some of the other losses that they had as well. Next is cornerback Darius Williams, nose tackle Sebastian Joseph Day, guard Austin Corbett, and then here's another pretty big one to note: running back Sony Michel. He was a pretty productive runner for the Rams last year with 845 yards rushing last season. He averaged 4.1 yards per carry, and he had 4 touchdowns. So that's a pretty big loss, okay? Next, let's move into who restructured their contract. This one is a big note to make. Leonard Floyd, another outside linebacker for the Los Angeles Rams, who they keep. He moved $12 million off his contract. He restructured it, and so $12 million is off the books for the salary cap this year for the Los Angeles Rams to make the moves that they've been making happen and stick. Okay, so that's the restructured parts. Okay, moving on. The next thing we want to talk about is Odell Beckham Jr. He just arrived in Los Angeles last year. He was traded by the Cleveland Browns, and he started 7 games with 27 receptions and 305 yards receiving with 5 touchdowns for the Los Angeles Rams last year. I got to tell y'all, though, him and Stafford really were starting to look scary there in the Super Bowl before Odell Beckham Jr. went down with his leg injury. You got to think he's coming in from a pretty rough situation. He was not getting the ball a lot there in Cleveland. He comes in, he starts to build a relationship and a connection with Matt Stafford. And man, let me tell you something. It was really starting to look like it was about to take off there in the Super Bowl. And then boom, Odell Beckham got injured. The crazy thing about this is, and the whole reason we talk about it, is because they haven't got it all worked out. He came in for 1 year. They're trying to figure out and negotiate how to move forward. And let's put it this way, Odell Beckham Jr. has been out there looking at his options. I think it'd be a good thing for both sides here to try to make it happen. I think Odell could do well there with Matthew Stafford, and I think the Rams could use him there at receiver. So let's move on. Let's talk about the NFL draft for the Los Angeles Rams. They didn't have a first or second round pick, so they started off in round 3. They drafted Logan Bruss, guard from Wisconsin. Round 4, Jacoby Durant, cornerback from South Carolina State. I like this next pick. Round 5, they picked Kyren Williams, running back from Notre Dame. In 2 seasons, Kyren Williams rushed for 2,127 yards and 27 rushing touchdowns there at Notre Dame. Those are some pretty dang good numbers. And you think about it, you lost Sony Michel, you got Kyron Williams coming in. Great draft pick there in round 5 for the Los Angeles Rams. I think it was an awesome pick. So this loss of Sony Michel, it hits a little less if Kyron Williams can come in right away, step in, and start producing. Okay. Moving on to the next couple picks. Round 6, they drafted Quentin Lake, safety from UCLA. Kind of like that pick. Round 6, they picked Darian Kendrick from Georgia, cornerback. Round 7, they drafted Daniel Hardy, edge rusher from Montana State. So looking at those draft picks, it really looks like the Rams are hoping to find some luck in replacing Darius Williams, who was a strong tackler on the perimeter for them. He's headed off to Jacksonville, right? They also added some O-line depth after losing starting guard Austin Corbett to Carolina. The Rams look to be in pretty dang good shape after making their Super Bowl run and now moving into the next season. They secured Matt Stafford. You potentially lose OBJ and Von Miller, but you picked up Allen Robinson and you picked up Bobby Wagner. I don't know if Justin Hollins replaces Von Miller on the edge, but putting Bobby Wagner inside helps a lot. I trust the coaches here and the Rams coaching staff, and I think they can make this talented unit work and mesh together. So I think the Rams are in really good shape with who they lost. They had big losses, but they've had big pickups as well. And so I'm really thinking the Rams are in pretty good shape for next football season. Let's move on to the next team. We're going to talk about the San Francisco 49ers. Couple additions that they made for their team this year. They picked up cornerback Charvarius Ward from Kansas City. He had 67 tackles and 2 interceptions there with the Chiefs last season. Next, they picked up safety George Odom, who started 7 games for the Indianapolis Colts last season. He had 55 tackles and 1 interception. Next, the San Francisco 49ers went out and picked up wide receiver Ray McLeod. He had 367 yards receiving. But one key note to make is that he's also a solid kick returner too. He averaged 22 yards a kick return last season for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Okay, so that's a pretty good signing. You know, the football, there's 3 phases to the game: offense, defense, and special teams. You definitely need a good special teams unit as well. You never know when that's going to be the deciding factor in a game. So Ray McLeod, it's a pretty good signing for the San Francisco 49ers. One more addition I want to note, and I like this one a lot for the San Francisco 49ers, is defensive tackle Hassan Ridgeway. Last year with Philly, he had 20 tackles and 2 sacks. This is a great depth move. As teams get tired in the fourth quarter, Hassan Ridgeway and Javon Kinlaw are going to be trouble in the trenches for opposing teams that are playing the San Francisco 49ers next year. Moving on, let's talk about who the 49ers lost. Big loss right here for the 49ers. Boom, another big moment. But probably not one that makes headlines, but a big loss for the 49ers. Laken Tomlinson, their Pro Bowl offensive guard, he's headed off to the Jets. Next, they had another big loss. Defensive lineman DJ Jones, 56 tackles and 2 sacks. That's a ton of production to replace. That was all on the interior part of the defensive line. DJ Jones was a monster for the 49ers last year. But again, the Hassan Ridgeway pickup hopefully helps offset that with Javon Kinlaw, them two in a nice little rotation. Moving on to the next loss, you have offensive lineman Tom Compton, running back Raheem Mostert. Raheem Mostert, he had a lot of potential coming into the league, but the past couple seasons he's struggled with injuries. Just this past season, he's now recovering from surgery for chipped cartilage in his knee. But the 49ers decided, it's time to move on, and now Raheem Mostert is gone. The next loss is defensive end Arden Key. He had 22 tackles and 6.5 sacks. The 6.5 sacks, that's a pretty big deal. But I think they're going to be okay, the 49ers. Let's move on to the next part of the 49ers talk here. We're moving on to their draft picks. They did not have a pick in the first round. Their first pick was here in round 2, and they took edge rusher Drake Johnson from USC. I think what they're trying to do here is that they're hoping that they find somebody to put on the opposite side of Nick Bosa. So I think that's why they took edge rusher Drake Johnson here from USC. Round 3, they picked up running back Tyrion Davis-Price from LSU. I like this pickup. Davis-Price was a 1,000-yard rusher this past season for LSU. He's a big back at 232 pounds, and they need another back to complement Elijah Mitchell. So I like that pick in the 3rd round for the San Francisco 49ers. You got Raheem Mostert leaving, Tyrion Davis-Price coming in from LSU. The 49ers had another pick in round 3. And being here in Texas, I did get to watch this kid play a little bit, and I like him. I think it's a good pick for the 49ers. They picked up wide receiver Danny Gray from SMU. Danny Gray had 803 yards receiving and 9 touchdowns last year. This kid's got blazing speed. That's one thing about him. If he's able to maneuver and move through the zones without messing up his timing and his routes and stuff, he's got the speed to really make some big plays happen. His speed is he ran a 4.33 40, and he's 6 foot and 185 pounds. I really think he might be a good slot receiver someday. Looking over things, the Niners look to possibly have him as the backup right wide receiver right now. But let's just see what happens. If they can find a way to make it work, I really think this kid could be a good slot receiver for them. So moving on to their next pick. In round 7, the last pick, the San Francisco 49ers had the very last pick of the NFL draft, and they took quarterback Brock Purdy from Iowa State. Once they figure out what to do with Jimmy G, I feel like they can have Purdy step in and hopefully be a good backup. Purdy has potential. He's got good value, especially the very last pick in the NFL draft. Again, anytime I get a chance, of course I'm going to do this. But Brock Purdy being in the Big 12, playing at Iowa State, watched a lot of him play my Baylor Bears, Sikkim Bears. But Purdy has a lot of potential. Good value there in round 7. I don't think he would have been a bad pick as high as the 4th or 5th round. So to get him at the very last pick in round 7, I think the 49ers could potentially get good value from that. And, I think he could be a seasonal backup for them. I think he could stick it out and do that for them. So let's kind of look over some notes of how these 49ers look. Trey Lance has 3 years on his rookie contract, but you probably want to figure out what to do with Jimmy G before then. Jimmy is set to make $27 to $28 million this year. Just want to point out that I'm not quite sold on Trey Lance, but I'm looking forward to see what he can do this season. He's a projected starter, and it's time for the 49ers to see what he is made of since he was their first-round pick last year. So Trey Lance, you're up, buddy. Let's see what you're made of. All right, so the next thing that the Niners have to figure out, they've got a lot of figuring out to do here, clearly, right? The next thing that they need to figure out is what to do with Deebo Samuel. He doesn't appear to like being such a big part of the running game, but the Niners sure did find a way to constantly put the ball in his hands and let him shine. It's a great relationship. I think Deebo and the Niners are good for each other. This is one you should try to find a way to work it out. Deebo, San Francisco, y'all are made for each other. Y'all need to figure out how to work this out. If they can keep him this year and move Jimmy G next year, and also work up a contract for Debo next year, that would be the best thing for the 49ers if they can pull all of that off. That was a whole mouthful, okay? Let's talk about that again. If they can keep him this year and they have to hold on to Jimmy G as well, next year they need to talk about a contract for Debo and move Jimmy Garoppolo. Moving that $28 million kind of frees up some money. And if Debo sticks it out this year, then you can potentially move some things around and talk about a big contract for Debo because he certainly earned it. So moving on. One more thing that the 49ers need to figure out is what do they do with Jason Verrett. He's trying to come back from a torn ACL. There's potential there, but it's hard to pay him without seeing how he's going to come back from that ACL tear. People come back all the time from ACL tears. I get it, but cornerback, man, that's one of the toughest positions on the field. You're talking about lots of leg movement, lots of change of direction. If you're sitting there at corner, you're covering a receiver right in front of you, and it's all reaction and it's all leg and hip movement, right? You go where the receiver goes, and you've got to react quickly. Does Jason Verrett still have that? He's got to change directions, and he's got to use his legs and his knees a whole bunch. Can he still do that? So the 49ers need to figure that out and figure out if he's worth paying. If he can come back, man, he's going to be a huge help to the secondary because they did make a couple of moves that could help there. The 49ers are in good hands if they can keep Debo, and then they have George Kittle, of course, Mr. Consistent there, their tight end. They will need Davis Price to come in and contribute to the running game immediately. This offense will be on the shoulder of Trey Lance. He's a gifted athlete, but the big question here is he a pro passer? Again, as I mentioned, I'm not sold on it yet, so let's find out this year. Trey Lance, I think you're a great football player. Go prove me wrong, man. Let's see if you've got it. So that's the offense, y'all. Let's talk about the defense. The defense is in good hands with Nick Bosa leading the way and applying pressure. It does hurt to lose DJ Jones on the defensive front, but the Niners look to try to make moves to replace him by committee, and it might just work. I like the moves that they made. The secondary also needs to improve, and you are getting Jason Verrett back, and if he's good to go, then that helps a ton. Picking up Charvarius Ward was a good move, and he should play across from Jason Verrett. So that's your San Francisco 49ers. Let's move on to the next team. All right. Next up is your Arizona Cardinals. Let's talk about the additions that they made. They picked up guard Will Hernandez from the New York Giants. They picked up cornerback Jeff Gladney from the Vikings. I like this pickup. Jeff Gladney didn't get to play football last year. He was dealing with a court case, okay? But man, in 2020, Jeff Gladney had 81 tackles for the Vikings. And man, this could be a really good move for the Arizona Cardinals if Gladney is ready to play this year after sitting a whole year off. I like this pickup. Especially if he's ready to go. The next pickup, this made headlines because it happened right in the middle of the NFL draft. The Arizona Cardinals picked up wide receiver Hollywood Brown from the Ravens during a draft trade that they made with the Ravens. Hollywood Brown's a 1,000-yard receiver last year with 6 touchdowns. Those are good numbers when Lamar Jackson is your quarterback and he's such a threat on the ground. Jackson can really, man, he's just such a gifted athlete. We always talk about how quarterbacks cannot run in today's NFL. Lamar Jackson does. And when he does, he makes things happen. And he's definitely an athlete. Some of the knock is that he doesn't throw the ball downfield enough because he's always looking to run. But man, the guy's a football player. He finds ways to win. And he when he does throw the football, he does throw it decently. But it's fewer and far between than some of these rocket launchers that are out there right now, and these precision passers like Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. He doesn't throw the football like that. So for Hollywood Brown to have 1,000 yards receiving last year, he had a dang good season. Moving on to the next one, a big move here that I want to note. It wasn't an addition necessarily. It was a big retention, a big piece for the Arizona Cardinals for them to keep this season. They made sure that A.J. Green is here for one more season. The 7-time Pro Bowler had 848 yards receiving last year. I think coming back for another year with Kyler Murray. You've got Hollywood Brown out there now. I think it's a good move for A.J. Green and the Arizona Cardinals to have him come back. So let's see how that pans out. I like that move a lot. Moving on to the draft picks for the Arizona Cardinals. They did not have a pick in round 1. Round 2, they picked up tight end Trey McBride from Colorado State. I like this kid. I like this kid a lot. He was an 1,100-yard receiving tight end last year. The kid is 6'4", 246 pounds, and he ran a 4.54 40-yard dash. The Arizona Cardinals really picked up an athlete and a big guy, right there in Trey McBride. So I like that pickup a lot. Moving on to the next pick, in round 3, they picked up Cameron Thomas, edge rusher from San Diego State. Cameron Thomas had 71 tackles and 10.5 sacks for the Aztecs last season. Cameron Thomas was very busy there at San Diego State. Again, it's a group of 6 team though, but 71 tackles and 10.5 sacks. I don't care if it's Power 5 or group of 5. That's some good stuff right there. Cameron Thomas is 6'5" and 270 pounds. Size-wise, I think he can hold his own, but he's not the quickest guy out there. He clocked a 4.78 40-yard dash. He's probably going to need to rely on a strong motor and make a living coming in, making plays after initial pressure is made. Cameron Thomas could be a good player if he brings the motor that never turns off. Okay? So what that means is just for those, listening, what I mean by bring that motor is give 100% every time he's out there on the field. Some football players, yes, they do. It happens. They take plays off. I don't think Cameron Thomas can afford to do that. I think this guy's going to need to have a motor that never turns off. So that's what I mean. Okay. Moving on to the next pick. They're still in round 3, and they picked up Myjai Sanders, edge rusher from Cincinnati. So they took 2 edge rushers in round 3. You don't see that often, but they did. Myjai Sanders is 6'5", 255 pounds. Last year for Cincinnati, he had 41 tackles and 2.5 sacks. Moving on to the next pick, round 6, Keontae Ingram, running back from USC. He had 911 yards rushing last year and 5 touchdowns. Keontae Ingram is 6 foot and he's 215 pounds, and he ran a 4.53 40-yard dash. Keontae Ingram made his way to USC from Texas after Bijan Robinson came in and really asserted himself in the running back role there in Austin for the Texas Longhorns. But man, Keontae Ingram, he's a talented running back. And he showed that with USC last year, and I think this was a good draft pick in round 6. Next, just a couple things to note is that they picked up a couple of O-line picks late in the draft. So let's talk about a summary of the Arizona Cardinals here now. Starting with the offense. The Arizona Cardinals look good on offense. A.J. Green and Hollywood Brown, along with Zach Ertz. The passing game is in great shape with these pass catchers. Kyler Murray, I'm expecting him to have a great season. He's a competitor, and I expect him to take a step up from last year. Adding Hollywood Brown, that should help too. So I think Kyler Murray, I think he's grinning ear to ear right now, just like I am, thinking about what the NFL season is going to look like with the weapons that he has with Hollywood Brown, Zach Ertz, and A.J. Green. So that's the passing game. Let's move on to the ground game, okay? The ground game has been nothing flashy. James Conner is a productive running back in the red zone with 15 touchdowns last year, but he averages less than 4 yards per carry. 3 yards in a cloud of dust when James Conner's in there, okay? Eno Benjamin, he's a running back that needs to prove himself this year. The Cardinals certainly look to have drafted Keontae Ingram in case Eno Benjamin does not pan out. And just in case, Keontae Ingram, I have a feeling he's going to go in there and I think he's going to want to start making a name for himself, and I think he's capable of doing so. So there might be a little running back battle there, especially to see who's that number 2 punch there at running back for the Arizona Cardinals, Keontae Ingram or Eno Benjamin. So keep an eye on that if you're an Arizona Cardinal fan. I would not be surprised if Keontae Ingram came in and started getting some touches as soon as this season. Okay, so let's see what happens with that. So let's move on to the defense. Talked about the offense. Let's move on to the defense for the Arizona Cardinals. First things first, J.J. Watt. He's the veteran, and he looks to bring energy to a pretty good defensive unit. The linebackers look good. Zaven Collins looks to take on a bigger role this year at the strong side linebacker position for the Arizona Cardinals, and I think he's going to do a good job there. If he does do that, Isaiah Simmons, the weak side linebacker right next to him, should have even a better year than he did last year. Isaiah Simmons had an outstanding year last year for the Arizona Cardinals. So with Zaven Collins getting another year, to improve on the strong side linebacker position, guy's 260 pounds. He's a huge linebacker, and he's going to do a great job of taking on that strong side linebacker role. And I think Isaiah Simmons can even do better than he did last year. So let's see how that looks for the Arizona Cardinals this year. Next point I want to make as far as the defense is concerned is Marcus Golden and Devin Kennard really need to step up on the edges. After losing Chandler Jones this offseason, it was huge. I know we didn't note that earlier, but whoa, boom, caught you off guard. Chandler Jones is gone, and he's with the Las Vegas Raiders now. And man, that's a huge loss for the Arizona Cardinals. Chandler Jones is an amazing edge player. And so how do you make that up? Right now it looks like Marcus Golden and Devin Kennard. We'll see if they're up for the challenge. I don't think they quite do what Chandler Jones did, but overall as a whole, this defensive unit is a pretty good defense, and so they should be okay. Okay, even though that's a big loss, and I think they are gonna feel it, this defense should be okay. So let's move on to the next team. Last but not least, or maybe they are the least. We'll see. Let's start talking about them. Next up is your Seattle Seahawks. Ooh, and y'all know where I'm going with this. The Seattle Seahawks lost Russell Wilson and Bobby Wagner this offseason. Oh my gosh. Seattle Seahawks fans, are y'all freaking out right now? Like, what? I mean, just two huge parts of your team. The last couple parts that were there from the Super Bowl. Maybe y'all are ready to move on, but oh my God, that's got to sting a little bit, doesn't it? So let's see what happens. The Seattle Seahawks are going to look like a whole different team now. So again, lost Russell Wilson and Bobby Wagner, and they picked up Drew Lock to replace Russell Wilson. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. So who else did they pick up? They picked up Uchenna Nwosu, linebacker from the Chargers. He's no Bobby Wagner, but you have to bring in a new strong side backer. Not a bad move, just not Bobby Wagner. So let's see if Nwosu can come in and help the Seahawks out here, okay? Next pickup that they did, they picked up Artie Burns, cornerback from Chicago. Artie Burns started 6 games for the Bears last season, and he had 23 tackles. He's a good corner when healthy. Trey Brown will be starting over him most likely, so he can come in, add some depth, and get healthy with this situation that he has with the Seahawks. So I like the Artie Burns signing, and I think maybe it does pay off for him. So after losing all that, okay, we had some big losses, right? That's kind of all the additions that the Seattle Seahawks have done, that are worthy of noting. Okay, so let's move on. I guess. Let's move on to their NFL draft picks. First up, in round 1, they drafted Charles Cross, offensive tackle from Mississippi State. Big guy. Big, massive guy and a great prospect. He looks to start right off the bat at the left tackle position immediately. Moving on to round 2, they picked up Boye Mafe, edge rusher from Minnesota. He looks to be backing up Nwosu after I looked at the roster and kind of looked how things could possibly play out. He looks to be backing up Nwosu at the Sam backer position. Mafe is a great football player. Do not be surprised if he finds himself on the field often this season and finds a way to get on the field. Boye Mafe, man, an amazing athlete, a great draft pick in round 2 for the Seattle Seahawks, and I think he finds a way to get on the field. We're still in round 2, and man, this is one of my favorite picks in this division. Again, in round 2, the Seattle Seahawks picked up Kenneth Walker, running back from Michigan State. I know people don't like to take running backs that high in the draft anymore, but Kenneth Walker, man, this kid's he's a workhorse back, and this was a great pick. This is arguably the best running back in the draft this year. He had an amazing year at Michigan State with 1,636 yards rushing. Woo! Let's rewind that. This kid had 1,636 yards rushing and 18 touchdowns for Michigan State last year. You don't hear that from running backs too often anymore. Like I said, a great workhorse, a consistent back, and man, he had an awesome year for the Spartans last year. At 210 pounds, he was flying with a 4.38 40-yard dash. So not only is this kid just a good workhorse, but boom, as soon as he finds a hole, he's got breakaway speed. Big deal. Again, that's why I just think it was just a great pick. He's such a special player and a fundamentally sound running back. So good job, Seattle. Great pickup with Kenneth Walker. Moving on, they did not have a pick in round 3. Definitely not one of noting. In round 4, they had Kobe Bryant, cornerback from Cincinnati. Really good corner that got overshadowed by the ridiculous play of Sauce Gardner there in Cincinnati. Kobe Bryant definitely held his own. He had 44 tackles and 2 picks on a very good Cincinnati Bearcats defense. Here in round 4, good pickup for the Seattle Seahawks. Again, good job, Seattle. Good job. Round 5, they picked up Tariq Woolen, cornerback from UTSA. This kid's a big corner. He's 6'4", and man, he has blazing speeds for his size. He made the switch to corner in college, okay? So I think there could be a little adjustment here, but I think that's okay. Big kid, great speed. I think he could potentially help in the return game as he continues to shape his game defensively here on the pro level. So a good, it was a good project pick for them in round 5. So let's talk about the summary now. That's the draft picks that I wanted to highlight for the Seattle Seahawks. So moving on to the summary of the team, offense and defense. I like the draft picks, but who on earth is going to throw the football around on offense for the Seattle Seahawks? The QB battle is currently between Drew Lock and Geno Smith. Woo! Yeah, I guess not too many people there in Seattle are probably excited about that. The Seahawks arguably have the worst QB room in the NFL right now. Rashad Penny, let's give the Seattle Seahawks a break now. I've really bashed them on the quarterback situation, so let's move on. Rashad Penny, he's a good back who averages over 6 yards per carry. But for him to keep that production up, the Seahawks desperately need Drew Lock or Geno Smith to at least be average. Okay, if they can do that, maybe Rashad Penny can have another good year for them, and maybe they have a respectable offense. They have some good wide receiver targets with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. Let's see if either of these quarterbacks can get them the ball. The Seahawks lost Russ, and they really flopped in trying to replace him so far. Very worrisome. Seattle, sound the alarms. Big concern, okay, especially offensively, okay? Whew, I know that's scary. Hopefully you don't have no nightmares tonight thinking about it, but let's move on to the defense, okay? The safeties for the Seattle Seahawks are the bright spot of this defense. One of the best safety duos in the NFL with Quandre Diggs and Jamal Adams. Trey Brown needs to come back healthy and step up at corner. Jordan Brooks has had a very productive season last year with 184 tackles. Woo! 184 tackles last year at linebacker for Jordan Brooks. The defensive line, man, the play there really needs to improve for the Seahawks, man. The linebackers should not be having to work that hard. So the defensive line needs to improve, okay? That's the big part on defense that needs to improve. So with that said, they brought in Quentin Jefferson to play defensive tackle from the Raiders, and he played very well up front for the Raiders. So, again, I mean, I know I've been bashing Seattle here, but great move. Great pickup on the defensive line where you really need help. They need help big time up front from Quentin Jefferson, so the linebackers don't have to work so hard. Great pickup, Seattle. I like it. All right. So that's all I have for you as far as the NFC West is concerned. That's all the notes that I have for each team and what they did this offseason as far as free agency moves, as far as their NFL draft picks. And so now it's time. Let's dive into my early predictions of the NFC West. Let's see how I have it playing out for next season. So let's start it off. Number 1, I've got your Super Bowl champs, the Los Angeles Rams. Okay, I think they bring enough back. They've got a good team. Matt Stafford, if he can repeat what he did last year, the Los Angeles Rams are going to be just fine. The Los Angeles Rams are going to be just fine. Moving on to the next pick, you've got number 2, the Arizona Cardinals. That's what I have coming in number 2 with the NFC West. I like the team. I think Kyler Murray's going to step it up and just, they were good last year and they're going to be good again this year and maybe even a little bit better. The defense might not be as good, but the offense is certainly better, and Kyler Murray's going to step it up just a bit, and this team's going to be just fine. They're going to be a playoff team in my mind, and so I think the Arizona Cardinals come in at number 2. Number 3 is your San Francisco 49ers. As far as the top 3 teams in this division is concerned, all very good teams, okay? Respect to y'all. I think the San Francisco 49ers have a great team. It's just a matter of Trey Lance, can he come in this year and be that guy to overtake the Arizona Cardinals or the Los Angeles Rams? I don't think so. I don't think he's quite ready for that yet. This is their future, and they're starting to break it in just this year. But I think the San Francisco 49ers are still a good football team. I think he's going to have a pretty good year. We're going to find out if he's their future or not. And if he is, the 49ers should be excited. It should be a fun season if he can step in with the weapons that he has, the defense that they have. If he can step in and deliver, this is a good football team. And so to wrap this up, the early predictions of the NFC West and the number 4 team, last in the division, your Seattle Seahawks. You lose Russell Wilson and you pick up Drew Lock. Wow. I mean, I am still just shocked about this. Like, what is going on? It's just a down year for the Seattle Seahawks. I see them struggling, and it's going to be a tough year for them. So that's your predictions for the NFC West, okay? Let's keep it moving. That was the meat of the show. Before we dive into the next part of this show, if you like what you've been hearing so far, if you think, man, Chris, you're delivering excellent content, this is so awesome, please do me a favor. At the end of this show, please hit the subscribe button, okay? And make sure you continue to watch me moving forward. I appreciate everybody that's been listening over the past few weeks. Thanks again. Let's keep this show moving, okay? Next up, we're going to talk about the NBA playoffs. This round of the NBA playoffs has turned out to be really fun. I thought there was a potential for several blowouts, several sweeps, but that has not been the case. This has been a fun round of the NBA playoffs. As of this recording, I'm recording on Thursday, okay, May 12th. So yesterday the Grizzlies got a huge win to keep the series alive against the Warriors, but the Warriors lead 3-2. So that kept the Grizzlies in it, okay? So that's a big deal as far as the Grizzlies concerned, okay? Moving on to the next teams, we have the Bucks and the Celtics. They had a really entertaining game yesterday, and the Bucks pulled it off. They won 110-107. The Bucks lead the series 3-2 with that win, so it was evened up, and such a close game, and the Bucks came away with it, and right now they lead the series 3-2. The next couple teams up is the Heat, and what they did is they finished off the 76ers today. The game was 99-90, and the Miami Heat are moving on to the Eastern Conference Finals. Next up is the Dallas Mavericks, and they had a huge win tonight. Shout out to my Dallas Mavericks. Go Mavs, go. Go Luka. Good win tonight against the Suns, the Phoenix Suns, to tie up this series 3-3. Great job, Mavs. So with a win, the Warriors or the Bucks could move on. So the next games that are playing out for the NBA playoffs are tomorrow, which is Friday, May 13th. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, as you can tell, man, the NBA playoffs is really fun right now. And some serious games are happening tomorrow. So if you get a chance, there's 2 games going on tomorrow. Be sure to tune in, okay? So let's move on to the last part of my show. Just a couple college sports recruiting notes that I have. There's a big one right off the bat. Boom. Let's talk about it. The number 1 overall player in the 2024 class, 5-star QB Dylan Raiola from Chandler, Arizona. He committed to Ohio State this week. Huge news for the Buckeyes. So Dylan Raiola is going to Ohio State once he gets out of high school, and he's the number 1 overall player in the 2024 class right now. The next note that I want to make is on Jordan Addison, wide receiver from Pitt, last year's Biletnikoff winner, and he's in the transfer portal as we touched on this last week. Rumors are that Texas was out of the hunt for him, but that's not true at all. He took a visit to Austin this week, and it looks like it was a good visit. Okay, so the Longhorns are definitely in this. What I said last week is not true. The Texas Longhorns are in the race for Jordan Addison. What's happening next is he's setting up a visit to USC this weekend. That's been the other big rumor, is that it's most likely USC. Nobody's really sure at this point. He's going to go check it out this weekend, and he's going to spend some time in Los Angeles. So it looks like it's a 3-man race for Jordan Addison right now, and that race is between Alabama, USC, and Texas. Okay. So as we continue to do this podcast weekly, Let's continue to keep a close eye on this huge move that's shaping up in regards to Jordan Addison. Okay? Well, guys, that's it. Yeah, that's all. That's all that I have for y'all this week. Thank you for tuning in to this Week 5 episode of Talking Sports with Chris Meza. I really appreciate y'all that are taking time out the day to listen to the show. And if you're new to the show and you really enjoyed the show, again, when the show is done, please be sure to subscribe here on YouTube, okay? Next, also be sure to follow me on my social media platforms. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and you can find me on Facebook as well. Be sure to follow me. The easiest way to find me on those platforms is at Talk Sports Meza, okay? And be sure to follow me. I post some pretty good content on there as well, besides the shows that I post weekly. So be sure to check me out. The show is called Talking Sports with Chris Meza. So again, you got something you want to tell me? You think I'm wrong about something? Post it in the comments. Find me on social media. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about sports. This brings us all together, right? There's not too much to do with the NFL offseason going on right now. Of course, the NBA playoffs are fun. Some baseball's going on. But, man, I know a lot of us are gearing up for football. So you want to talk? Let's have a good chat, okay? Reach out to me. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Be sure to come back next week. Appreciate y'all. Take care. God bless. And we're out. Man,
hold up, man. Pull up, stun. Yeah, though. Ice game flood. Yeah, though. Every day I'm hustling. Yeah, though. I be getting to the mud. Yeah, though. Shout out to my big bro, Tommy. She stay on her. Okay, how about this? Looking so awesome. Looking like $1 million. Translation flossing. Hold up.